All right, everyone, is everyone ready to get started? Okay, so thank you all so much for coming today. My name is Shenir Dennis, and I'm currently a junior at Santa Clara University. I major in English and Ethnic Studies, and I minor in Women's and Gender Studies. Today, I will be introducing our speakers for the event, Writing with Joy, a conversation on pop culture with R. Eric Thomas and Dr. Danielle Morgan. This event is co-sponsored by SCU's Office of Diversity and Inclusion and the Center for the Arts and Humanities. We're excited for everyone to be here today, and we hope you share a similar sentiment. R. Eric Thomas is the national best-selling author of Here for It or How to Save Your Soul in America, a read with Jenna Book Club pick featured on Today, and a laugh out loud memoir strongly recommended for everyone. His biography of Representative Maxine Waters, Reclaiming Her Time, co-authored with Helena Andrews Dyer, makes the case that political biographies shine bright when they have as much panache as their subject. He is also a television writer, a playwright, and the long-running host of The Moth in Philadelphia and DC. Sorry, guys. For 4 years, he was a senior staff writer for Elle.com, where he wrote Eric Reads the News, a daily current events and culture column. He won the 2016 Barrymore Award for Best New Play and the 2018 Dramatists Guild Lamford Wilson Award. Dr. Danielle Fuentes Morgan is an assistant professor in the Department of English here at Santa Clara University. She specializes in African American literature and culture in the 20th and 21st centuries, and is interested in the ways that literature, popular culture, and humor shape identity and formation. In particular, her research and teaching reflects her interests in African American satire and comedy, literature and the arts as activism, and the continuing influence of history on contemporary articulations of Black selfhood. Danielle has written a variety of both scholarly and popular articles and has been interviewed on topics as varied as Black Lives Matter, the dangers of the Karen figure, race and sexuality on the Broadway stage, and Beyonce. Her book, Laughing to Keep from Dying, African American Satire in the 21st Century, addresses the contemporary role of African American satire as a critical realm of social justice. So after a conversation of 40 minutes, there will be an opportunity for 20 minutes of question and answers. Please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the Zoom to ask your questions. But I will now turn the event over to our speakers.
All right, thank you so much, Shenir. I am so happy that this event is happening. I'm so happy that I get a chance to talk to you today, Eric. This is fantastic.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. Yeah, Thank you so much for having me. It's really great to talk to you face to face. And yeah, I'm really excited to do this. I also love, in your bio, you've been interviewed about literally all of my favorite subjects.
Yeah, I have to confess that when I was reading Here for It, I was like, why are we not actually friends in real life? We're now literary friends, but we should actually be friends because we have so many shared interests. So I'm glad to hear you. We are now best friends.
We're now best friends. That's the point of doing these events. Yeah.
So there we go. So I want to dive in so that we have time for other people's questions, because I have tons of questions that I want to make sure I give other people some time. So let me share my screen very quickly. And one of the first ways that I really came across you, you've written so many things, but the first thing that I really came across was this fantastic commentary, I guess we'll call it, that you wrote about this incredible picture. And this picture, I won't say everything that you said. I'll let people, if you haven't read this commentary, you absolutely should read this commentary. But this is a picture, if you're looking at your screen, of Obama, Trudeau, and Nieto. And what some of what is written here is, you can see the first sentence that says, whoever took this photo deserves a GD Pulitzer Prize. And then some of my favorite quotes are, these three out here in the streets looking like Career Day Ken, looking like Destiny's Dilf, looking like the alternate universe version of our current political universe, looking like Tom Ford presents The Avengers. The first time I saw this, I was just kind of blown away. It felt so not only joyful and really fun, but just so spot on. And so I shared it on my Facebook. And then when I went back, I had seen that, tons of my own friends had shared this. And then it just kind of seemed like it was spreading like wildfire. So I'm curious, this was back in 2016, 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago at this
Hmm.
point. Were you surprised by the response people had to this, that it kind of traveled this quickly?
Oh, absolutely. I had gone viral only once before, pardon me, excuse me. I'd gone viral once before. I wrote a blog post complaining about how expensive Beyonce concert tickets are. And it had the same kind of tone, just sort of incredulous and sort of, just for my own amusement, really. And maybe like 100,000 people like clicked on the blog post, and I was like, "Wow, I'm famous," and that was not true. So I knew that this kind of thing happened on the internet, but I was not. I don't. I didn't at that point, and I try not to now. Write with an idea of an eye toward virality, and so like getting 17,000 shares and hundreds of thousands of likes was wild to me. I literally I woke up one Saturday morning, I saw this picture, I think on Facebook, somebody had shared an article about NAFTA, and I was like, "Bagank," and so I just like typed it up on Facebook really quickly, like hadn't gotten out of bed, and went about my day, and then all of a sudden my life changed. Like literally everything in my life that's happening right now is from this one picture. I'm glad I have a terrible habit of scrolling on the internet for 6 hours before I get out of bed, because clearly this is the path to to success.
Yeah, I mean it's so interesting because I see when people go viral for kind of poppy things that it's very similar. It's very seldom uh, seems to have a great deal of like intentionality behind it, where they're like, this is my magnum opus for Twitter. It's always something that you've kind of hastily thrown together, and then
Hmm.
their next tweet is something like, dear God, what have I done? Because it kind of goes huge
Yes.
before you anticipate it. You maybe don't want to be known for the thing that you're tweeting about, maybe you do. But this was a really kind of interesting moment that felt like it was a part of this big kind of cultural zeitgeist. We could look at that all day, but I'll stop sharing my screen. But it really sort of captured um this kind of political moment and the sort of optimism I think that a lot of us were really searching for in 2016, right? That it was
Yeah.
this moment of sort of uncertainty and unrest with Obama being coming to the end of his presidency and feeling like that pendulum was going to swing and all of these things. But you brought up something that we could all sort of share in, because regardless of your political affiliation, beauty is beauty. You could
Yeah.
see you could see that this was a gorgeous picture. You could see that they looked like they were having fun, and you were able to capture it. And one of the things I really like also about this kind of being your big sort of entry into the world is that it feels so much like, it sounds so much like your voice. I mean, you
Mm.
have such a really identifiable voice to my reading. Um, that's very warm and welcoming, but also really confident and really precise. That your use of language, as an English professor, your use of language is very precise. And I've actually taught some of your um, blog posts and things like that in
Oh,
my
wow.
comedy class. Yeah, to talk about how can we write about the things that matter to us in a way that's fun, but also still maintains that kind of specificity. And you always do that. So as I was, thinking about some of your blog posts, thinking again about Here for It, which is one of my favorite books of the year for sure, and thinking about kind of your trajectory, you've written so all of these kinds of different things, right? That you have written plays, you have written these blogs, you've written articles, you've written a book on Maxine Waters now with Helena Andrews Dyer, all of these things. So you are not only writing about pop culture, you're also creating pop culture now, which is a really cool line. So I have a sort of two-pronged question about that, which is, first of all, how dare you? Because how dare you be so good in so many genres when the rest of us are struggling to be good or reasonable in one. And the second is, how do you determine what venues to write in, and how do you kind of, I'm thinking especially for our students who are here today, how did you end up being able to get into so many different fields, and what does that feel like for you? And I should also say that you write for television as well, so you've really kind of hit all of these incredible genres of literature and cultural production. How does that happen?
Well, it's interesting. My father, last year, yeah, it was sometime last year, I guess after my book came out, my parents came to, my father's the most supportive person in the entire world. And then my parents came to a book signing event right before the world shut down. And he was like, you know, you are an overnight sensation, 39 years in the making. And I was like, that's a read. He doesn't think it's a read, but that is a read. But I mean, that's for me the answer there. It's that like this has been a really long, really circuitous road. I spent 10 years waiting tables and not really writing. In fact, I went, you know, I do a little bit of writing at night. My first love was always plays, and so I was always trying to figure out a way into um, theater. And I think for any students watching, like for me, I love writing, and I sort of went to college thinking I was going to be Toni Morrison, and that position was filled, and so I was like, well, what am I going to do? But I figured, all right, I need an entry point, and so sometimes the entry point is like trying to get into a literary establishment by going to grad school or writing for literary journals and submitting. My tactic was like, I want to get into theater. And so I moved to Philadelphia where there was a burgeoning regional theater scene. And then I waited tables for 10 years and didn't do any theater. And a friend of mine asked me one time, he was like, what do you do? Like, you write your little plays and then you put them in a drawer. And I was like, well, no, I save them on my desktop. Like, I don't have a printer. How would I print something?
Century, of course, yeah.
Exactly. Like what am I on my, the printing press over here? So that's a really long way of saying I tried a lot of doors and I found those doors to be either locked or closed or just sort of they didn't really fit me. And so, but I always believe in carrying an umbrella and being ready. And I didn't know what that meant for me as a writer. But in retrospect, and really retrospect is I look best in retrospect. Looking forward, I'm like, ooh, what's going on? But in retrospect, it's like I was trying out different things. As a playwright, I was learning how to use voice really specifically and use character really specifically, which happened to coincide with this phase in media where we had just passed the era of the personal essay, the sort of BuzzFeed essay, like it happened to me. And people were looking for voicey, poppy, bloggy content that also had a perspective. So like post Jezebel, post Gawker, obviously those things are still going on, but like with a little bit more of a less blog and more sort of like structure. And so like my interest in form as a playwright and as a burgeoning essayist matched up with my interest in voice and sort of playing with tone. That comes mostly at that point came mostly from being a playwright and from being from doing storytelling, live storytelling with The Moth and other organizations. So to answer the second question, like how do I decide? I sort of go back to this umbrella thing. Like I say yes to too many things and I try too many things, which is like that's such a gross answer. It's like, well, I just love doing so many things, and so I do them. I I I I love having the privilege of experimenting with writing. And there are some projects that I've worked on that I've been like, oh, this was a mistake. This is not for me. And so I don't do that anymore. But I don't know until I do it. And I do try and learn something from every project that I'm a part of. There have been, when I was writing for Elle, people would ask, like, can you freelance for this or that, this newspaper, this magazine? Can you do this kind of thing, profile, interview? And like profile is sort of the main way of making money in online media. I really don't like writing profiles, and I feel like I shouldn't say that because I'm like cutting off the purse strings on my bag, but like it's exhausting and it's confusing to me and it's a strange form and I don't really know how to like work tone in there. And I tried it for a little while and then I don't really do it anymore. And so like I say all that to say that like I've learned so much from like interviewing people and from trying to structure a profile, and I take that with me. But I also don't think of myself as a profile writer. And so there will be so many people, I think, in life, whether you're a student or or sort of in the writing world already, who will try and tell you that one, you need to be a generalist, you need to be able to do everything, and two, you have to say yes to everything. And sometimes that's a financial decision, and that's between you and your accountant and your bank account. But I don't believe that you have to. I don't believe that you have to be everything to everybody, particularly as a writer of color, particularly as a Black writer. Um, as time went on, and the attention of the country changed to things that have always been going on. I got a lot more requests to like what I call open up a vein and put it on the page. And sometimes I did if it seemed like a good idea or I was in the right place. And a lot of times I didn't. And, and again, that's a financial decision. Do we want to perform our trauma? Do we want to turn our trauma into like an inspirational story or not? I don't know. It like I really try and bifurcate those two things. So like I'm like, all right, well, I need to get my car fixed. So I got to do this thing versus I'm trying to build this skill. I'm trying to be this kind of writer. And I think those two are just separate tracks and they have to be for me. Otherwise, I'm like, then I spiral and I'm like, oh, there's no ethical consumption and no ethical production and
Right.
everything I write is content. And I don't think that's true.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. I hope it's helpful for the students. It was helpful for me to hear just this idea that you've tried so many different things and that sometimes you leave that kind of moment of trying and saying, that's not for me, or that's not the thing that I want to do. Because part of, I think, one of the reasons why people like writing about pop culture, like reading what someone has written about pop culture and also feel that they themselves can do it, is that it has this kind of feigned that it almost feels easy. One of the reasons that here for it, or your blog posts and things like that, or your newsletter, I think are so resonant, is because it feels like we're having a conversation with our friend Eric, right?
Hmm.
But to hear you talk about the fact that you're still that it's work, that it's not, it's sort of one of the reasons I love studying comedy, is thinking about the fact that Dave Chappelle has this kind of feigned ease about him, that I'm just telling jokes, it doesn't really matter, it is what it is. But obviously he's working really hard at it. And when you start to kind of think about the literature, the writing, as having that sort of impulse behind it, then it becomes a different way of sort of respecting the work that the author is taking to create these things that we consume, and the sort of value that pop culture has in and of itself, that it's not, that it can sort of be frivolous, that it can be sort of fun, but that it also has a sort of value to us as humans, that it's something that takes time and is worthy of our consideration in that kind of way. Um, so yeah, I think that's really interesting. I want to get even more specific with that question then, because you talked about kind of the genres that you find, that some are more on, of interest to you, and more in line with the kinds of writing you want to do, where others are less so. When you are commenting on popular culture, how do you determine what to actually write about? Like, because and I'm thinking right now of the fact that because of the way social media sort of churns out these news stories all the time, there's just a plethora of things you could always be writing about. I checked Twitter right before before we logged on, just to see if I had missed anything, and I learned that like John Mulaney, I was only understanding his divorce as of yesterday, and now he's dating Olivia Munn, and I don't.
What?
Okay, I'm scooping you here. Yeah, I we'll have to like I don't know what to do with this information. And this was literally like 10 minutes before logging on. And I just found out, I'm sure his ex-wife knew all of these things. This just happened. And I need everyone to slow down. Like I read this and I'm like, stop. There's just too much. I need a moment to process. So for someone like you who, people are kind of like, what's Eric going to say about this? How do you determine what is worth writing about? What's of interest? Do you find that you kind of, sketch out a bunch of different ideas, or do you have the, sort of when something happens with Beyonce, clearly I'm going to write about it? Or what's your sort of impulse with that?
That's a really fantastic question. And a lot of it I sort of learned by doing at Elle. Originally, the column was really built around photos. And so I would spend a lot of time on Getty Images, just sort of scrolling through and trying to find inspiration. And that worked for a while, but like not every day there's like a funny photo to work through. My criteria were always, and so then I sort of switched to like living on Twitter. And I did that for about 3.5 years, just sort of living on Twitter. And but my criteria were always, is there something new to say? Like, on Twitter or on Facebook, there's usually like a primary joke, if there is a joke at all. And I never wanted to sort of go in with that. So I had to be able to either build on the joke or have another angle. So that was my first question. 2, am I able to make fun of this in a way that is not punching down? And so my rule, but up until the 2016 election, I didn't write about President Trump. I was like, how dare I say that word? I'm like, it's technically true. I didn't write about President Trump because I didn't find him funny. I found it very dark, and I didn't really feel like that was punching down, but I also just didn't feel like it was improving the overall health of my column. But one, I mostly don't write about non-celebrities, even if they are involved in sort of pop culture stuff. And 2, I don't try and write about like anything that feels sort of cruel. Like there's a lot of different ways to write about somebody like Britney Spears. I think Britney Spears is a fantastic and very interesting celebrity. But I've only written about her a couple of times. My favorite time, she did this video where she was like, hey guys, and she's in her gym, and she's like, hey guys, I'm back in my gym. As you know, it burned down, but it's fine now. And then she like went on and did her little thing. Brittany is so fantastic because she always lets us in media res. She is beginning the play. She's a mid-century well-made play, and it is beginning. And so I wrote and like a lot of times the headline would come first for me. So I was like, and if not the headline, then the lead, which is for those, anyone who doesn't know, is the first paragraph, the first couple of sentences. And so what I was doing with my column a lot of times was I was really putting on the drag of journalism. I was like, all right, well, I know that in the first paragraph, you have to explain who, what, where, why, how, and why should I care? And I also have to be like, and here's the joke. And so for me, with the Britney column, the headline came first. The headline was Britney's gym, which had burned down, is now fine. And that just seemed funny to me. I was like, you got everything you need to know. And so then I could just like dance around this idea forever. So those 3 things, like, is it something that I can punch up if I'm punching at all? And a lot of times I wasn't punching. I felt like I was just sort of like a seal playing with a beach ball. Like, I don't want to punch, People think that like, sometimes people are like, be mean about this. And I'm like, oh, I hope I'm not mean. I did get a little bit more snarky as time went on, but times got darker. And then I stopped writing the column because I was like, ugh, ugh. Um, so nowadays, like, interestingly, so this Olivia Munn news, I also am always like asking myself, what do I think is the weirdest or funniest thing about this? And one of the terrible things about my column is that it really rewarded my interest in minutia and nostalgia. And that is a terrible thing to encourage in a person because it never stops. So, like, yeah, the big headline, John Mulaney, Olivia Munn. I'm like, I want to do like a deep dive to be like, what? Olivia Munn, explain. Like, I don't, like, it's not like I don't get the appeal, but I'm also sort of like, what? There's so many celebrities where you're just like, what's happening here? Like,
Yes.
where, where, who, what, where, why, how? And and congratulations to everyone involved, but also like, what?
What's
Because it also
happening?
feels like,
Right.
yeah, like a lot of times with celebrity and with pop culture, it feels like somebody's like pressing a little couple different buttons and hitting send. And I want to be like, what did you mean by this? And that's what I like about pop culture is that it does feel like celebrity is a performance, pop culture is a performance, and and politics is a performance. And I think it's helpful to treat them all as such, but also to do so with varying degrees. And obviously, we treat politics as too much of a performance. Bad things happen. But like, I am always writing about the performance. I'm writing about camp. I'm writing about the quotation of celebrity, of star power,
Mhm.
as opposed to this human did this thing. Like, I I don't want to make fun of anyone for being a human. I want to make light, hopefully with the other person, of this project that we're all engaged in, where they perform something and then we receive it and we're like, what, like, how should I, please explain to me how I should feel about Olivia Munn and John Mulaney, because that's what keep me, I'm going to stay up all night thinking about this.
You and me both. I'm still, I just need time to process it. It's basically how I feel. I was like, when I saw it, I was like, I wish I hadn't gone on Twitter because I am not prepared to not blurt this out. Because I don't understand what's happening. And so yeah, I like that you have that same sense of interest, I guess, in these kinds of news items. And I think for a reason that is really um, kind of rare, that you're right, that people sometimes want the meanness, or that there's this idea that talking about pop culture has to be sort of twisting the knife with all of these celebrities because they're beautiful, they're rich, their lives are different from, they're not really just like us, and all of those kinds of things. But there's a way that we can also talk about kind of the absurdity of what celebrity looks like and what celebrity requires of these folks, that isn't necessarily making fun of these actual living human beings. And I think
Right.
that's something that you do so well, that's really kind of unusual for people in the sort of field that you're in. So I appreciate that a lot. Um, so one thing about me that people often find surprising, but it's not a secret at all, is that I am obsessed with Green Day. I have been, like, Green Day has been my favorite band since I was in middle school. It has been, 20 plus years at this point, all of these kinds of things. But because of that, I keep tossing around in my head all of these projects that I would like to do related to Green
Mhm.
Day, but I feel like I'm too invested in the idea of the band that I can't effectively write about them. And I'm curious, do you have any people or topics where you feel like, what, I don't even have the sort of vague, like, when I talk about Beyonce, I can do that and I still love Beyonce. Green Day feels like a bridge too far. And so I'm curious if there's anything where you're like, I can't talk about this thing. I can't talk about this person because I'm too invested, or if you are able to kind of compartmentalize that and shift away.
It's interesting. I think there are things that, I think about like the movie Clue or the Muppets in general, where I am not always able to formulate like or like the movies of Nora Ephron, the rom-coms, I'm not always able to formulate like, it's not like a punchline driven thing. And and what's interesting that you asked that, because I actually am just about to start another sort of side project where I just sort of write about like go long on like pop culture and nostalgia, and it's not sort of formulated around um being a deranged fan, which is sort of, that's my kind of personality. And instead it's just like, I want to just like seriously talk about how amazing it is, the water ballet in the Great Muppet Caper, where Miss Piggy comes out of the water with the
Yes.
sparklers on her head. Like, I don't have a joke there. I just like, I'm like, yeah, that's the best thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Whitney Houston same way. Like, and also I'm sort of like, yeah, like I think Whitney Houston makes great reaction gifs and memes, but yeah, like Whitney, Prince, I'm sort of like, I mean, Prince is, I mean, when you talk about like comedic fodder, that's eating good. Prince wore purple all the time. He was essentially like a deity. Like Prince, Isabella Rossellini in Death Becomes Her was playing Prince. That's my hot take. And so, but I'm like, yeah, I got nothing. Prince is perfect. So yeah, it's interesting because like Beyonce, I can always sort of, you know, when she did that, that pregnancy photo shoot, I was teaching a class, I think, and it dropped. And one of my students was like, Beyonce, pregnancy photo shoot. And I was like, class dismissed. And I like ran home and like typed out my, you know, my deranged thing. But it's like, that's so outrageous. She's like swimming with these water nymphs and like pregnant with twins. She's
Fabric and yeah, the whole
fabric. She's on like in a like dressed as like the Virgin Mary, like but on from a candle, like that kind of stuff. That really revs my engine. But like there are some things I think that like just I think things that got into my heart early enough that I'm like, oh no, this is just excellent. What are you gonna do? Audra McDonald, I kind of feel that way.
yes.
Although, I mean, she's astounding. Although I will always, my forever punchline is just talking about the high kick she did
When she was
pregnant
pregnant, yes.
on the Tonys.
Just I think about that high kick way too much.
Yes.
It's just remarkable.
Every day I wake up and I'm like, thank you that I saw live on
Live.
television this high kick. And then I went to go see Shuffle Along a couple weeks later and I was like, it's coming. I'm going to see the kick. And, you know, by that time she was probably like 6, 7 months pregnant. And what was amazing, like the part comes, I'm like, it's happening, it's happening. You could feel the tension in the audience. And then like Brian Stokes Mitchell like takes her arm, walks her right off the stage. He comes back, they do the whole thing, they do the kick, she walks back on, she hits her note. I was like, respect. Respect, Audra. Thank you very much. Thanks for doing it for the Tonys, but also please don't endanger yourself.
Right. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I can't believe you brought that up because I think about that kick so much. I'm just like, I just, and yeah, and seeing it live on stage where you're just like, oh, this is a fantastic performance. And then she just does this high kick fully pregnant and it was just unreal. She deserves all the good things. And I want more people to love her. People
Yes.
love Audrey McDonald, but more people should.
Yes.
That's my take.
I
Um,
agree.
so I think we have time for one more of my questions and then I'll turn it over. So if you haven't written questions either in the chat or in the Q&A, feel free to go ahead, but I'll ask one more question, which is sort of about Here for It, which I really want to
I'm going to do this back. We're going to do this together.
Yes. See, I knew this friendship was going to be forged in fire. But with Here for It, I loved this book. I found so much of it kind of interestingly relatable. We obviously had different experiences growing up with the kind of, being raised in a religious household, the sort of way you sort of meander through college and all of these kinds of things, the people that you encountered, the sort of interesting relationships that you've had, both romantic and otherwise, all of these things just felt very relatable to me, but they're also so personal. Like they are very clearly your experiences written in your voice. And I'm curious, when I've talked to other people about Here for It, which I do a lot, a number of people have said, oh, I like it just really spoke to me. It felt so resonant. It felt really relatable. Why do you think so many people related to your experiences that you've written about when they are clearly your unique, very individual experiences?
That's such a great question. And I think one for me, the root was always in storytelling, and storytelling with an eye on the audience. And I got my start, like I said, like telling live stories at these storytelling shows, the Moth, and an organization in Philly. And so the experience of standing in front of a group of strangers, um, sometimes able to see them if it was like in a cabaret space, and sometimes not able to see them if it was a larger theater, um, really sort of shaped my expectation and my way of framing a story. And so, like, I got to the point where I had to work through all my sort of issues and tension around the story. I had to think through what was entertaining to me, so that I could keep telling the story and make myself laugh, and also what was entertaining to an audience. And I had to think about how, and in my style of comedy, both in the column when I talk about pop culture, or when I'm talking about myself, is just sort of absolute specificity. And I'm glad that nobody ever said to me, like, I don't know what you're talking about right now, because it would have sort of ruined the way I write. And so now I've gotten to the point where I understand how to, the way I think about it is, the comedian Paul Mooney, Black comedian, has a quote. He says, for Black comedians, and I don't consider myself a comedian, but I think this is useful. Black comedians have two styles of talking. There's one where you talk to the white audience, and there's one kind of conversation that's just us. And I really like having just us conversations. But I also, and so when you have a just us conversation that isn't a closed door, you invite people to um listen, and to like to open themselves up, and to Google if they need to. And so, and a lot of this was my editor Sarah Weiss at Valentine. There were times where she'd be like, you're explaining this to white people, and I was like, you know what, I am. And so I'd pull back, and instead sort of assuming that the reader has the capacity to see me as a full human being, and to enjoy themselves in this story. I think it's something that, like, I just sort of, that confidence sort of came from trying to make strangers laugh with the truth. And I also, one of my first table waiting jobs was at a comedy club. And so I'd watch people like Dave Chappelle, Pablo Francisco, Brett Butler working on their acts, figuring out how to work with an audience, do crowd work, and realizing that, like, there is a boldness to standing up and saying, we share the same sense of humor, and I'm going to show you how. And so I think it's that boldness. And I think I really carry that with me. I don't know that I, I don't know that I feel like I am belong in the world. And I definitely don't feel like I'm the main character in any way. Um, much of my book is about an experience of otherness. But I have a sneaking suspicion that we all have spaces where we don't feel like we belong. And I wrote to the commonality of humanness. And the only way that I understand how to be human is in the skin. And so I just wrote about that. Because, and like, really, I mean, and that sounds like a great theory. A lot of it's also, I just didn't know how to, another way of doing it.
Yeah, I like that. I like what you said, and I'll quote you in future classes, that idea of, that you only know how to be human in the skin that you're in, right? And that becomes kind of part of what's relatable, is that you are sharing these human experiences as your human experience unfolds. And I think that's really interesting, that you're not necessarily trying to kind of reach this broad audience or anything, that you're talking about yourself within a frame that other people can really understand and that's useful to other people. And I think you do that so well. Again, before I turn it over for and we start looking at the questions, I just want to say This book is incredible. I could not put it down. I have 2 small children. I was eking out the time to read this like during, naps and, at midnight and things like this, because I really just fully enjoyed it so much. So thank you so much. Let's see what questions there are for us.
I do want to, while you're looking, I do want to say one more thing, just sort of to any writers out there. One of the things that was so incredible was the experience of being able to write for Elle. And what it taught me was that I don't always know who my audience is. And I think challenging, or who could be in my audience. So Elle's readership is, largely women. And I don't know that 5 years ago I would have said, who's going to love me? Like a mom in Kansas, And so I think what I would say to any writer is that, like, you don't know who's going to be a huge fan of your work, and that will surprise you. And so sort of going forward and saying, I bet you're going to love this, and putting yourself in different circumstances has really, really opened up my world. And when my publisher asked me, like, who's the audience for this book, I sort of unabashedly said everybody. And, that's not helpful, because they were like, okay, but what do we put into our ad spreadsheet? Yeah. And I was like, I don't know. People, comma, general. Maybe not dads. I don't know.
Great. Yeah. I think that actually Margaret Russell had a question that she wrote in the chat that kind of segues from that, which is when you're talking about the question or the idea of you don't know who your audience is, have any of your subjects ever seen that you've written about them, and have they ever responded? Has Beyonce, for example, ever seen what you've written and said, hey, Eric, I'm sure she starts, hey, Eric, it's Beyonce, and it moves from there. But have you ever had anyone respond?
Yeah. I mean, I started off writing about Representative Maxine Waters pretty early on, and she responded, really, really positively. And, obviously that ended up with me writing a book about her. Representative Joyce Beatty of Ohio reached out. I think she was the first person. I was just like, oh no, people are reading this. Ava DuVernay, I wrote about the trailer for A Wrinkle in Time. Talks about Oprah's architectural right wing. It looks like a Gehry building. It was astounding. And she wrote to me and was just like, this is so funny. Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote to me, and I think, oh my God, I was like, the most embarrassing part, I'm going to tell 2 stories about embarrassing things around thirst. I wrote this post about whether Lin-Manuel Miranda was hotter with a beard or without a beard. And I was like, verdict, I can't remember what the verdict was. I think with beard. And so he wrote to me, he was like, sure, I'm sorry, I don't have a beard right now. Yeah. And I was like, oh no. And then the other thing I was writing about the people's sexiest man, when Blake, I can't remember who, the guy from the Voice, married to Gwen Stefani. And he was chosen, and I was like, did every other man disappear?
Yes.
Was there a rapture?
So yes.
So I just listed all these hot guys and just little jokes about them. And then I was like, who's hot? Fred Savage is hot. You need to get used to this. Fred Savage is very hot. And it's true, he is. And so a couple of days later, my husband and I went out to the movies, and we came home. We were living in an apartment building on the 4th floor. There's a flower vase at my door. And I was like, uh-oh, what's going on? And my husband's like, what's going on? And I was like, baby, I don't know. So I look at the card, and it says, I've never felt so beautiful, love, Fred. And David was like, who's Fred? And I was like, I don't know. What have I been doing? And I was like, Fred Savage. So Fred Savage sent me flowers for calling him hot. So, yes, we can.
That is, oh my gosh, that is amazing. Wow. I don't even know. This is over. I'm just closing my computer now. Yeah, that's amazing. And that's great that you had that positive experience of somebody reading what you wrote and being like, yes, thank you for writing. Yes. That's excellent. Thank you to Margaret for that great question. Right? Let's see. So Lauren Loftus is asking, in the beginning of your book, you talk about the start of your writing with Elle and how you were convinced that any moment they made a mistake, hiring you to write your column, paying you to make jokes. This struck me as a writer who hasn't made it in exactly the way society, my parents, professors, or even myself thought I would, as a case of imposter syndrome that so many today feel. How did you accept that you did and do deserve success, or are you still scared that you'll be found out? And she also says she's a huge fan.
Oh, thank you, Lauren, and thank you. We communicate on Twitter every once in a while, and I wanted to say hello and thank you for joining us today. Um, well, I also am like, are you Brian, my therapist, asking this? Because literally once a month, really once a week, at our session, I'm like, Brian, I'm an imposter. He's like, I think you might not be. So you know, the other side of my whole bring an umbrella thing, try every door, be prepared, and when somebody's gives you an opportunity, say yes, is that I spend a lot of time standing there holding my umbrella in the rain and being like, okay, but what if I get, well, like, is this really an umbrella? Do I have anything in my hand? Am I just pretending that I'm, dry? This metaphor, who knows? I'm workshopping it clearly. So I scare myself constantly. But I'm learning to one, it's like that sign from the Japanese roller coaster during the middle of the pandemic, please scream inside your heart. That I'm learning to scream inside my heart while sort of acting as if. And yeah, like one of the things, I left Elle in December because I had an opportunity to start writing for television, and I'm writing a couple more books. And I was like, this is deranged, Eric. The news is about to get better. It's about the pop culture is about to come back. You can write this column forever, And I was like, also like, it's silly to leave your gig. And but even as I was like, oh, I can like do this all day, I still every day I would get up, particularly during the pandemic, and I'd be like, I don't think I can do this anymore. Like, not like I hated it, but like, I think I've been faking it and the
Wow.
time has run out, So I don't know. One of the hard things about social media is that everybody's, this is not an original thought. Everybody's posting their wins, and everybody is also sort of giving you feedback all the time. And I don't like opinions. And it's hard to sort of figure out what's right sized and what is true about where I am in my career. So I have to constantly ask myself, well, what's my objective? And today I spent most of today working on an episode of television that will eventually hit your airways next year. And I was scared all day. I was like, they're going to figure out that I'm not funny and I don't know how to write half-hour television and I'm not really sure how final draft works. And they might. But if that's the case, then I'll know that and I'll either get better or I'll move on and doing something else.
I like that. I like that idea of asking yourself, what is your objective? That's something I'll take with me as well, as the imposter syndrome goes on forever. So that's great. Erica Lloyd has a great question. She says, I loved Here for It. How do you decide what to share about your family and other people in your life, which obviously is quite different than writing about celebrities?
That's a great question. I was very careful about asking myself, what are my stories? And I only told stories that were mine. And like, my husband was like, you can write anything you want about me. And I was like, meanwhile, Dr. Faust is like, I have a bargain for you. And I'm like, I don't think so, It just felt really slippery. And I'm a big fan of David Sedaris. And I think, there's always this conversation, these questions about like, how much of it has actually happened? And, is he turning his family into characters? And that's for him. And that's his business. I got very nervous that I would, at the end of my life, or in 5 years or 2 years, turn around and realize that I've turned my family into content. And so, for instance, like a lot of people asked me when the book was coming out, you don't write about coming out like to your parents. Is there a story there? And I'm like, oh, it's a really great story. And I never tell it because it's not just my story. And it involves them in a great way. They're wonderful. But in a way, and I feel like I'm like teasing this story that people are like, why? Tell me. But it involves them in a way that that I can't ask them to give permission for. Um, and so yeah, there are so many stories that happen with my family that I'm just like, this is, I'm not the protagonist and I'm not the joke, and therefore I can't use it. Um, and we'll see. I hope I keep that objective. Citing another book deal, I was like, I might have to lose my morals. So we'll see.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that I related to in particular about Here for It is the way you talk about your family, where it's very clear that there is love there, that this is that everyone in this story is human. You don't have
Mhm.
like the antagonist or this kind of static figure who keeps coming along to foil you, that, people have conflicts and then they figure it out.
Yeah.
And it feels I sometimes hate when people talk about authenticity with writing, because it feels very fraught sometimes, but it does feel very authentic. It feels like, to me, that was really relatable, that, you love the people, and you recognize that everyone is human too, that both of these things exist. And it doesn't have to be that someone was a villain in
Yeah.
any moment, that they can just be a person who's trying to figure things out as well.
Yeah.
Okay, we have one more question, which is about John Mulaney and Olivia Munn, which is from Jessica, who wants to know your take specifically on John Mulaney and Olivia Munn dating after meeting at church service in LA.
Get out of here. They met at church in LA. I hope it wasn't one of those like, we're not really gay, we're not really gay friendly, but we're going to be cool about it churches. I don't know. What am I doing? I'm not even like, I couldn't, it couldn't be on the stand anymore. They met at church. This is parody. This is farce. Here's the thing about so many celebrity news things is that it's just farce. You put a Mad Lib together. It's like the MASH thing you play when you're a little kid. It's like, where will we meet? Mansion, club, church. And who will it be? Anna Kendrick, Olivia Munn, Sana Latham, Olivia Munn. I don't know why am I end this bit, Eric. I can't believe it. John Mulaney sitting in church. He does his whole act about how he's like doesn't go to church, doesn't believe in it. And what church? What celebrity brunette church for people who look like like tall like giraffe brunette church? I just don't understand. Who is the pastor there? Who is the pastor of
That's
this church? Who's up in the
that's
front like,
right.
good evening. I'm going to do a tight five, and then maybe John Mulaney can come up, and then Olivia Munn can come and talk about her experience filming the X-Men. I can't. I mean, look, I married a pastor, so like I understand the value of of showing up to church, looking both for like the Lord and also for love. But what they taking communion? I can't. I cannot I cannot picture Olivia Munn taking communion. Just can't do it. Cannot do it. Also, I think John Mulaney's very hot. There we go.
I think that's fair. And I don't, yeah, I am, I know the question wasn't asked of me, but I have so many thoughts.
Please tell me.
I don't, was it a Catholic church? What was happening? Because he was raised Catholic and he talks about it all the time. Is Olivia Munn Catholic? Is this a secret celebrity church? Grace asks in it, was this the church where Kanye is the pastor? Could it be? We have no concept. Was it church or was it church? What is happening?
I hope.
Why are
Okay.
these things just seeping out in this kind of way? I need more information.
Yeah. First of all, everybody who goes to that church has too much decorum. Because I would have been like in church service, like, hey girl, so Olivia Munn. Okay, one side of the church. John Mulaney, other side of the church. The horse is loose in the hospital. So the other thing. So I hope. Okay, here's how I hope it is. I hope it's my first choice is that it's Kanye's church, but that would really disappoint me for them because I think Kanye's church is like a Ponzi scheme. I don't know what it is. But like that's the celebrity church. Busy Phillips goes there. I love Busy Phillips. No offense to Busy Phillips, but also I'm sorry, Kanye's church is not a church. Two, I hope it is just some random South Central black church where they're like it smells like macaroni and cheese because they're having dinner after church to celebrate the pastor's anniversary. Everybody has a huge hat on. Olivia had a hat on. John Mulaney's wearing a beige Obama suit. That is my dream. That is
Oh
my
my God.
dream. That is my vision of heaven. Lilius White is singing on the choir. This is what I want. Take me now, Jesus.
The idea of Olivia Munn walking into church very calmly with her church hat just so, and John Mulaney sitting there and them locking eyes across the pew.
Oh my
That's the story I want. That's the story I'm believing no matter what at this point. Whether
God.
it was Kanye, whether it was the South Central Black Church, I don't care. She was wearing a hat. He was sitting in the pew already. They locked eyes. They shared a moment, and this is what's happened.
Oh my
This is
gosh.
what this is the story now. Yeah,
I cannot believe like there are so many things. I mean, first of all, sorry to J Lo and Ben. I don't care about you anymore at all.
I feel exactly
Don't
the
come
same.
around my house anymore. All I care about is the strangest collection of words that is this relationship.
Yes.
Amazing, amazing. This is the Lifetime movie that we all deserve.
this this is the moment. Yes, this like the moment is here. It's happening right now, and it is Olivia Munn and John Mulaney having this relationship that apparently started in church. I so
Also, what church is meeting right now? We're not Panini. Go home. Did they meet in a Zoom chat? They're like, hey, I can see you. I can see you on the Zoom church, John
now
Mulaney.
I need more information about that. That's a great point that I had somehow forgotten. Yes, how did they meet at church? Is it an outdoor church? Is it on? I don't have the answers to this.
I don't know. All right, I'm gonna call John. We'll just kill him up. Yeah.
Yes, fill us back in. This is the information I need. I will not be happy until I know what's going on with this particular strange couple.
I'm
Yeah,
so glad that you broke this news right here
I've
on this
never been more
stage.
proud of you. See, and to the students in the crowd, when people say that caring about pop culture doesn't matter, look at the wonderful conversations we can have about what's
Yes.
happening in the world, in the midst of all of the chaos that is otherwise ensuing. So yes, I appreciate Jessica's question in
Yes, thank you.
particular for asking us this. Yeah, like I said, I found out about 5 minutes before logging in, and then I was like, maybe I shouldn't say anything. This might be. Is this? Maybe it's not appropriate for this. And then I was like, no, I have to say this thing because it's unbelievable that this has happened.
Oh my God.
I
Thank
was
you.
not even, I hadn't processed the divorce, and now they're asking me to process more. And
Yeah.
as a Mulaney fan, it's too much. It's just too
No.
much. It's asking
I
too much.
also refuse. When my friends are like, hey, I'm dating somebody new after getting out of a relationship 5 minutes ago, I'm like, you need to sit in your hands. Go touch some grass. Don't talk to me. I don't want to hear about your relationship. Celebrities do it. I'm all like, I don't want to hear about it, but I'll listen a
Tell
little
me
bit.
more,
Like
right?
slide a little note under my door. I don't approve of Jennifer, which is my couple name for J Lo and Ben Affleck. I've decided it's just Jennifer. I don't. Yeah, like I don't need the Ben Affleck part. I don't approve of it. I don't understand, and yet I stand. So
I feel exactly the same way. I feel very troubled by it all. It's not
troubled is
affecting me, but
exactly.
this is troubling to me. I'm not sure what it is, but something about it makes me feel uneasy, and I don't
Right.
appreciate it in the midst of everything else. I've got too much going on, J Lo. Like I don't want this.
I'm
So
busy.
we'll have to see. So this is probably the point to end. But I want to thank you first of all for coming and chatting with us today. This has been wonderful. I want to once again say that if you have not read Here for It, you absolutely should. It is fantastic. It is just a really, really beautiful read, and a really funny read, and a really, really thoughtful read. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you all for being here, taking time out of your schedules to be here as well. So,
Oh,
all
thank
right.
you. Thank you for having
Thank-
me. It was great.
Oh, my pleasure. Absolutely.